All right, y'all. Let's try this one more time. I almost had this thing finished, but then my wife called me, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So now I got to start all over. Hey, what's up? Come back with some more content today. Today we're going to talk about a book that I've read through a couple times called "Revealing America's Dark Skin Past," Volume 2, The Columbian Era. I'm not reading it in any specific order. We're just going to read it by chapter, and this is one of the chapters that's pretty interesting and denoting the importance and the monetary importance of slave markets. Slavery is more important it's more profitable than gold. So that's what this chapter is primarily about. So let's go ahead and get to it. I don't want to waste no time. All right. Slave makes more profit than gold. It is written in Columbus logs on the first day of his arrival to the New World that the indigenous people of the islands came swimming to the boats, bringing parrots, balls of cotton thread, javelins, and many other things, which they exchanged for articles we gave them, such as glass beads and hawks' bells. It is interesting that Columbus brought along hawks' bells to trade with the Native Americans. Author Leo Weiner, in his book, Africans and the Discovery of America, stated he carried such bells specifically for the purpose of trading with the Indians, no doubt, because voyagers to Africa had found them acceptable to the Negroes, who used rattles and bells in their fetish ceremonies. Now, they're some freaks. This means that Columbus knew before he left Spain he was going to be encountering Negroes or dark-skinned people in the New World. But how would he have come upon this information, and who were these voyagers? To get a better understanding of how this transpired, one must examine circumstances that preceded Columbus' initial voyage. So that's what we're going to talk about. What became known as the Age of Discovery or the Age of Exploration grew out of the Europeans' desire for wealth. Many European rulers knew that trade with Asia could make them rich, powerful, and wealthy. However, the inland route to Asia had been impassable for centuries because of the Muslim and Arab domination of those trade routes. The only alternative was an approach by sea. The Portuguese, because of their proximity to the Atlantic Ocean, were the first Europeans to venture down the coast of Africa in search of this sea route and the first to establish trading posts along the west coast of Africa. In 1441, the Portuguese for the first time obtained gold dust from traders on the western coast of Africa. The following year, Portuguese explorers returned from Africa with more gold dust and another cargo. 10 Africans. 5 plus 5, 10. By 1445, the Portuguese established their first trading post, slave market / fort in Argum Bay, which in present day is called Mauritania. I butchered that, y'all. So y'all can look that up. It's Mauritania. If you wanted to look it up, that's how it's spelled. Up until 1448, only 920 slaves were brought from Mauritania. By 1456, 800 to 1,000 slaves came from that era every year. So that's 8 years. Eventually, developing royal trade in Western Africa took precedence over establishing trade with India. So they started to focus on trading slaves. The Portuguese continued to venture down the western coast of Africa, setting up more trading posts, culminating in 1482 with the establishment of Elmina on the Gold Coast of Western Africa. The Portuguese, by this time, through various treaties, gained exclusive rights to trade along the western African coast, and the building of Elmina was to secure the gold and slaves as a royal monopoly of Portugal. The royal family even demanded that all merchants had to receive a royal license to do business at the Portuguese trading post. I wonder if that was the initial start of people having to have licenses to do certain businesses. One such person to receive a license was your boy, Christopher Columbus. Now, I've heard that Christopher Columbus was a Sephardic Jew and that he was somewhat of a man of color. But that has yet to be actually proven, and I'm not going to make that assertion here. I'll just throw that out there. Columbus started sailing at an early age, traversing the Mediterranean Sea, developing his trading and navigational skills as part of the Mediterranean trade. While in his 20s, he moved to Portugal after being shipwrecked in 1476 near the town of Lagos. In 1478, he married Felipa Perestrello, the daughter of a Portuguese noble. He was then sailing on missions for the Portuguese government from Lisbon all the way to Elmina. It was around this time that Columbus started to entertain the thought of venturing west to lands across the ocean. It is also that this time that Columbus ran into his brother Bartholomew, who not only was working out of Lisbon as a mariner, but also was a cartographer, a creator of maps and charts, and created many maps of the Atlantic Ocean. I'm glad they put that definition there because I didn't want to guess. There are some historians who say that it was Christopher, with his navigational skills, along with his brother Bartholomew, with his knowledge of the Atlantic, who thought of the plan together to travel to the Indies for a western route. Even the King of Portugal, Don Juan, knew of these faraway lands, which mariners and traders in his African province had spoken. Don Juan was even grateful that he did not finance Columbus' expedition, for if he had, he believed he would have been the emperor of 2 continents. Not only was it known that there were lands to the west, it was also known that to the south and southeast lay another world. The king was certain of this. Africans, he said, had traveled to that world. In fact, boats had been found which started out from Guinea, Africa, and navigated to the west with merchandise. You see, these 2 cultures, Africans and Native Americans in the 1400s, before Columbus' journey to the Americas, had a history with each other. The indigenous American and African peoples have interacted with each other in a variety of settings and situations. These interactions may well have begun in very ancient times. It was this knowledge that Columbus gained from interacting with African mariners and traders that was the precursor of the voyages to the New World. Now, I did hear that on Christopher Columbus's voyage, he had a Moor or a black person with him to show him the way. Columbus was not only planning for a western route to the Indies, he knew from his interactions with the African traders that there was gold in those faraway lands, gold in America. One must also presume that while interacting with the African traders, Columbus found out information about the inhabitants of the faraway lands and knew they were of a Negroid stock, which means another possible source of slaves. Even though gold was a very profitable market in the world, slaves made more profit than gold. The Portuguese knew this from experience, and Columbus knew this from his experience with the Portuguese and his personal involvement with the African traders and the African slave trade into the Mediterranean. He had intentions from the start of enslaving the Negro inhabitants from the faraway land. Many historians have recorded that the purpose of Columbus' journey was to find another route to the spice markets of China and Japan. The land route had been dominated for centuries by the Arabs and Muslims, and the European countries had been trying for centuries to find a new route to bypass them. In the 1480s, Columbus started asking for assistance to finance a new route to Spice Islands, westerly by sea. He first went to the King of Portugal, who turned him down repeatedly. At that time, the king's interest was to trade in Western Africa, which to him took precedence over establishing any new trade routes to India and Asia. After years of trying to procure funds in Portugal, Columbus left and moved to Spain with his brother. Columbus' brother Bartholomew and Columbus traveled to other countries to try to obtain the funding, but both returned to Spain with no results. Columbus was in Spain for 6 years before he finally received a royal proclamation from the King and Queen of Spain. This occurred after Spain finally won their independence from the Moors after the fall of Granada, which ended 8 centuries of Muslim domination of the Iberian Peninsula. Now that Spain was at peace, it could now devote their energies to other ventures and to finance Columbus's journey. Very, very interesting chapter. Now, I've also heard that Columbus' purpose was to find the Holy Land and to recapture Mount Zion for the Queen and the Catholic Church. So that was that chapter. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that helped you your time go by at work. Like I said, I said this initially in my video I made first before my wife called, that this is a listen. This is not a watch. You put your earpiece in your ear and you just go ahead and listen to this information and allow it to marinate in your mind. So that is all for this piece of content. I hope you enjoyed that. It's your favorite black guy from Nebraska. And yes, there's black people in Nebraska. And yes, you do need to subscribe and like and share. I appreciate you. I'll see you in the next one. I'm out.